What's up everybody, this is Ambro with AMBG, and in this video we're going to be talking about Far Cry 6. This is the latest entry in the long-running franchise from Ubisoft, and it will be out on October 7th, 2021 for the PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series consoles, PC, not on Steam, for the retail price of $59.99 US. On the PC, it will be on the Epic Games Store and the Ubisoft Store. As always, if you enjoy the video, remember to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to support the channel and see more content like this, consider subscribing. It would really help out and I'd greatly appreciate it. Now, on the off chance that you've never heard of this franchise or not played it, I'll go over a brief overview of the franchise as a whole, and then we'll go into what makes Far Cry 6 tick and what mechanics and elements the developers have added to make this a worthy addition to the franchise. So, fun fact, Far Cry, the first Far Cry, was developed by Crytek to show off their CryEngine software and was released back in March 2004. Eventually, Ubisoft obtained the rights to the franchise, and the majority of the development was handed off to Ubisoft Montreal with assistance from the other Ubisoft studios. The following games in the series have used a Ubisoft modified version of the CryEngine called the Dunia engine, which allowed for the open world gameplay. So yes, Far Cry in a nutshell is an open world first person shooter and is known for taking the player to these big, wide open, exotic locations. You had tropical locations like in Far Cry 3 with pirates and Vas Montenegro, and you've had more realized locations like the recent Far Cry 5, with the setting being in a modern day Montana as you take on the Cult and Joseph Seed. Now, these games are by no means sandboxes, but there often is quite a bit to do in Far Cry games. You can hunt animals for their pelts to improve your equipment, and there are enemy bases that you can raid and take over, and then of course there's the story to help push you along the game and keep you engaged. Now, to be honest, in my opinion, the appeal of a Far Cry game isn't necessarily the game design, it's a pretty by-the-books open world adventure. You have bases and you have other side objectives to clear. You have this massive map that you can unlock new sections of it by climbing, you guessed it, those classic Ubisoft towers. The story, which is admittedly good in some titles, really does help push you along. Just be warned, they're not all created equal. But really, you're just going around the map to certain markers and clearing it. Far Cry 3 is my personal favorite. I just can't get enough of Vas. Michael Mando did such a phenomenal job, but I could rant about Far Cry 3 for hours, but that's beside the point. That being said, what does make Far Cry so enjoyable is the sense of freedom and lack of hand-holding. The graphics in Far Cry have always been beautiful. Exploring these gorgeous locations and not constantly being told where to go or what to do is what makes it so enjoyable. You can travel via vehicles, wingsuits, or ride on the backs of animals in some cases. There are sometimes these trippy missions where you get high on drugs, and the combat is tight, and you get access to an arsenal of weapons. Ubisoft, of course, has added in new features and mechanics over the years, like the companions in Far Cry 5, and they've recently experimented with more RPG-like elements in Far Cry New Dawn, which I know not everyone liked, but we'll get more into that later. You do have very basic skill trees and skills that you can use. There's also a very basic stealth system in Far Cry games that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But Far Cry really is an enjoyable franchise. That's a super high-level overview of Far Cry as a whole, but in this video, we're going to talk about Far Cry 6. So let's get into that. Far Cry 6 takes place on the fictional Caribbean island of Yara, which is inspired by Cuba and is described by the developer as quote-unquote the largest Far Cry playground to date, and is a tropical paradise frozen in time. It's ruled by El Presidente Anton Castillo, who is played by Giancarlo Esposito, and is a fascist dictator who has full control over the island. Castillo is guiding his son Diego, who is unsure of his own future, to follow in his footsteps. Esposito actually described his character as a leader trying to empower the people to understand that they need strong leadership now, but they're stuck in the middle of a revolution. Esposito further added that his father was a dictator before him, and he wants to empower the people to take their country back. Anyway, the player takes control of a local named Danny Rojas, who is a former soldier in the Yaran Armed Forces turned guerrilla soldier fighting for freedom. The guerrilla soldiers are fighting to restore their nation to its former glories. Now, I know all of the trailers and marketing material have portrayed Danny as a female, but it is confirmed that you can select the gender of Danny. It doesn't appear that there will be any control over the customization of Danny, but the choice of gender is at least nice. This seems like a pretty standard setup to a Far Cry game. At the beginning of all the recent Far Cry games, you're introduced to the big bad villain who then allows you to run all over the island or location and fuck up their plans. You know, classic video game logic. One thing that is fairly new to the franchise is the city itself. We've not yet seen a populated city environment like that in a Far Cry game. We'll talk about this a little later, but this is definitely something that is a new addition. Now let's get into what we do know about Far Cry 6 so far from a gameplay perspective. Just be warned, we're going to get into some speculation as well, so not everything here has been confirmed, but a lot of it is fairly reasonable enough to mention it, so just keep that in mind. Oh, one more thing. Far Cry 6 is a cross-generational game. This was built to run from the ground up on last generation consoles, being the PS4 and the Xbox One, as well as the current generation of Xbox Series consoles and the PS5. Don't go expecting anything crazy or mind-blowing from a gameplay perspective, or new mechanics that can only be done on current generation consoles. Like the new Ratchet & Clank game that has the rift jumping that you can only do on the PS5, that physically cannot be done on the PS4, don't expect any of that here. It's just not going to happen. That out of the way, if you're watching this, odds are you've watched the trailers and you've seen the absolute absurdity of weapons that they're adding into the game. Railguns powered by car motors, a gun that shoots literal cans of tuna, backpack missile launchers, and of course, the CD launcher that plays the Macarena. Yeah, so that's a thing, and honestly, I don't hate it. You are a guerrilla fighter after all, and it fits the setting that you would need to scrap together whatever you can to fight back and survive, even if some of it is a bit over the top. It seems I'm not alone in saying that the selection of guns in Far Cry 5 was something left to be desired. They went for a more serious tone in 5, and the weapons were all pretty basic, barring a few of them of course, but in 6 it looks like they ramped up everything to absolutely insane levels. And you're going to need those guns because it does look like the map is huge. So a Reddit user by the name of Paul Morrison90 leaked a screenshot of the map. I'll leave a link to it down below so you can see for yourself, but it looks crazy. Not that huge maps are anything new to Ubisoft games, I'm looking at you, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but this does look a fair bit larger than other Far Cry games at least. What is interesting about the map is that it does look like it's color-coded. This has led to some of that speculation of there being different biomes, but it does seem like it would make sense. Just based on what we've seen, it looks like there is like a foresty type of swampy biome in the green part of the map, and then the capital or the city is in the yellow-brownish part of the map. But I think what the most interesting thing to see on the map is the little island in the bottom left-hand corner. Now, we don't know exactly what this is. It may be a tutorial island, which is not new to the franchise either, but also perhaps it could be the endgame island where you fight the final boss. Who knows, but it's cool that it's there, and we'll have to wait and see what it is. Speaking of the map, one thing that is confirmed is that there is no more map editor or arcade mode, which is a shame because that was one of the cooler aspects of Far Cry 5. It's confirmed that it won't be coming to future games either, and that kinda sucks. The arcade mode was a way to experience maps made by the community. I always appreciate this feature in games when devs add it. Not that I'm personally into creating maps or anything, but it's always really cool to see other people's creativity, so I was a bit let down by this. But hopefully it means that they allocated the resources that would have been spent making that on making the rest of the game the best that it can be. One more thing about the map, let's just circle back to the fact that there is now a city-like environment present within the game. As I mentioned, this is a first for the franchise. Up to this point, the locations have mostly been an open, like a small concentrated base in the middle of the woods or on a small island kind of thing. But there's been nothing with this kind of verticality. This also means that the city will be populated with NPCs in a combat environment, which is also something that we're not totally used to seeing in Far Cry. Usually there's a clear distinction in Far Cry games of friendly NPC environments and the enemy-controlled base environments. This looks like this may be the first time that these two things cross over into one another. We also may be able to actually explore the interior of the buildings in the capital. It is an open world, after all, and being able to do that would really make it feel more realized. I personally don't like it when open world games don't let you explore buildings. It just kind of feels fake, so here's hoping that that's included. The next gameplay element that is confirmed are the companions, or amigos as they're called in this game. While the idea of companions isn't new to the franchise, you had the guns for hire / fangs for hire in Far Cry 5. I still love Cheeseburger the Bear. However, in that game, you were allowed to have 2 companions at any given time. In Far Cry 6, you're only allowed to have 1. You've probably seen the trailer showcasing this. You've seen that little dog with the wheels for its back legs. Yeah, its name is Chorizo, and he or she is just adorable. Just go buy the game, honestly. That's just an instant buy for me. I mean, I could just end the video right there. Just go buy it. But seriously, it's always nice to have a companion in a single player game. Yes, I like my games where I'm the solo hero, but I also appreciate the games that make you feel like you're not completely alone, even if it is an AI controlled doggo. One more thing about the amigos. We've heard from the developers directly that the more that you use any given amigo, the more you're actually going to unlock abilities unique to that amigo. So there are benefits to keeping an amigo for the long term. In terms of abilities, just from what we've heard so far, Guapo the crocodile has the ability to self-revive, and Chorizo, as you can see in the footage right now, is actually able to distract enemy troops. Some neat stuff, excited to see where it goes. Another thing that the developers have actually talked about on an interview is the scaling back of the RPG elements that were introduced in Far Cry New Dawn. Now, New Dawn was easily my least favorite Far Cry in recent memory. It just felt lazy. I mean, they literally reused the same map from Far Cry 5 with a new coat of paint. That being said, I didn't completely hate the RPG elements, but you could tell that it was not as balanced as it should be. One of the main issues was that some locations later on in the game were way too difficult and didn't scale to your level. So they mentioned that they'll still retain the RPG elements with the leveling, but it won't be as unbalanced as it was in New Dawn. One thing that Far Cry has done well in the past is their skill trees. The game was never a full-on RPG with choices by any means, but the skill trees still felt cool and like your character was at least a little bit unique. You always felt like a badass, and if they have another awesome skill tree here, along with the leveling system, I think that could be cool. This also kind of leads into a discussion on the endgame content. A lot of Far Cry games, after you beat the main story, there just really isn't much to do. If you've already cleared the map by the time you finish the story, you had nothing to do except run around in an empty world and get attacked by honey badgers. But the devs did mention that the map won't be completely empty after beating the game. What this means exactly, we're still kind of unsure, so that's something to look out for. We do know that the enemy bases can be reset. Now, again, this is something that was done in previous Far Cry games, but they said that there may possibly be an element of farming resources tied to this mechanic. The details on this are still light, but I think that could be a cool thing to do. You know, see how fast and efficient you could take down a base and then get more rewards as a result. I'm with it. One more thing that is confirmed is that you can run around the safe bases in the game in a third-person perspective. Now, there are also cutscenes that show Danny from a third-person perspective. This is a complete departure from what you've been able to do in the past. Far Cry as a franchise has always had a heavy focus on keeping you in the first-person perspective. I think from a narrative perspective, though, this is a good choice. It lends the cutscenes a more cinematic flair, on top of the fact that Danny is now a voice protagonist, which is something that Far Cry has dabbled with in the past. But now you're able to see Danny in cutscenes and in those bases. And being able to see your character from a third-person perspective is neat, but honestly, if you can't customize your character, I kind of struggle to see what the point is really. That's just me. I'm happy that there is the option, but hopefully there are at least some light customization options. One last thing, co-op is going to make a return. I imagine this is going to be similar to Far Cry 5. I'm not going to get too much deeper into that, just know that it's there. The devs did, however, mention that unlike Far Cry 5, progress will be saved to each player as opposed to only the host. Now, I do want to get into some speculation of what could be in the game. None of this stuff has been confirmed, but a lot of it adds up, so I just want to talk about it for a quick second. First off being is the possible addition of non-violent activities around the world. There are a few segments in the trailer showing Danny holding chickens. This could possibly mean cockfight locations, I guess if you think it actually would be a violent activity, but for all we know, this is just a one-time story mission, but hey, a guy can dream. Dominoes is also another possibility, as you can see in one of the trailers, which kind of tells me that it is in the game, but it could just be a story mission. Another speculation is that Ubisoft may have added in a light stealth system into the game. From what we've seen, it looks like you may be able to holster your weapon in the capital, which is crawling with enemies, so that makes sense. But it would be interesting to see if they added in a Hitman-style stealth system into the game, you know, perhaps maybe in only certain locations. I know one thing that got pretty old in Far Cry 5 were the completely random attacks from enemies in the middle of nowhere, like, how did you find me? Where did you come from? So if there is some sort of expanded stealth system, that would definitely help me personally in feeling a little bit more grounded in the world. Far Cry does have a very basic stealth system in place, so this does kind of add up. That just about does it. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for sticking around, and hope that you found this video helpful. What do you guys think of what you've seen so far of Far Cry 6? Excited or just another bleh Ubisoft open world game? Let's talk down in the comments. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, remember to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more content like this and want to support the channel further, hit that subscribe button. It would really help out and I would greatly appreciate it. I'll catch you next time.